All right, welcome to a special edition of Walk Through Open Doors. Today I'm going to have my first guest on. It's somebody I'm really excited about talking to. Her name is Jenny Hughes. She's the founder of the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective. She is doing amazing work to help therapists, to help people who work with people, to help people who walk with other people through trauma and through difficult times, take care of themselves and recognize the impact that trauma might have on their own life. She is awesome and she is doing so much for people and she is brilliant. And I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. I'm looking forward to you getting to watch it. All right, welcome to the latest episode of Walk Through Open Doors. I'm really excited about my guest today. This is the first guest I've had since we rebranded and we moved to this new angle on how to improve your life. Today, I'm getting to talk with Dr. Jenny Hughes. She is the founder of the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective and a psychologist down in Houston. And I first connected with her, it was a couple months ago, wasn't it? When we hopped on a call and got to talking. The value that she is bringing for people who are doing the work of helping other people is so valuable. I'm excited to be able to share that with you today. If some of y'all follow me, I've already emailed you links to what she does. So this will give you a chance to listen and hear a little bit more about what she does. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us and tell us about what you're doing.
Thank you for having me. I love being able to hang out and chat with you and to share it with the world is everything.
It's, man, you'll probably hear me say this a couple times during this because what you're doing to help therapists and helping us understand more about, like, would you call it like secondhand trauma, vicarious trauma? What would you call it?
So it's technically vicarious trauma. So if I can do a little teaching really quick, it would be great because a lot of times people don't realize that the terms vicarious trauma and secondary traumatic stress are very different things. They're certainly similar, but vicarious trauma is something that can only be experienced by someone in a helping role or profession. And of course, therapists and trauma therapists in particular are going to experience a lot of vicarious trauma. It's where you're soaking up that stress, that trauma that you are sitting in with the person you're helping. And so it's happening because you're experiencing empathy. You're connecting with that person through empathy, which is almost like this open highway of then sharing kind of those experiences. Whereas secondary traumatic stress, it can happen to anyone, and it can be where, like, we learn about something terrible that happened, or we see images of war on the TV, right? And anything like that where we kind of learn about something awful and then it affects us as a human and it affects our emotions and the way that we're moving through the world. So secondary traumatic stress can happen to anyone. Vicarious trauma is specific to people in helping professions.
That's a super helpful distinction because there is something different about, I think, what therapists and different people who are walking through that with people go through. And what I was so excited to hear you say, and when I started reading about what you're doing, is I talked to so many therapists. I was a therapist for over 10 years. And I think that we minimize the impact that, because you're sitting there talking to somebody and they're telling you this awful thing and you've been walking with them for 6 months. And what I would always go back to, at least, I'd say, man, like, this is kind of messing with me, but they had to go through it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what kind of person am I to be thinking about how this is impacting me? Mm-hmm. Do you hear that often?
Absolutely. I mean, so many things are coming up for me. So one, we're taught and trained that vicarious trauma is this like boogeyman under the bed, that if we experience vicarious trauma, that we're not good enough, we're not strong enough, we're not cut out for this work. We also then, because of that, we minimize the impact of the work on us. And that just starts its whole own negative looping process. And what you're describing, our brain, especially the subcortical brain. So if you think of my hand as our brain, my palm is the brain stem. My thumb is the limbic system. So that's our emotional brain. The amygdala is here, the hippocampus. So for memories and stuff. And my fingers are the cortex. So like the smart, that gray squiggly stuff that you picture when you imagine a brain. So our fight, flight, freeze response is controlled by the limbic system and our brainstem. So when the amygdala picks up that there's something scary, that there's a threat, it's going to send a signal to the rest of these subcortical lower parts of our brain that are not involved in conscious thought, in conscious processes. And it's going to say, oh shit, we need to fight, we need to run away, we need to freeze, hide, we need to pretend we're dead, right? We need to fawn and make this threat, minimize it. And that happens to us in helping professions. We're listening to trauma. We're listening to stress. We're experiencing internally and somatically what it's like for that person that we're serving to go through those things. Our subcortical brain does not know that that's not actually a lived experience in that moment. Especially if we think in pictures, our brain doesn't know that the images that we're coming up with as the person is telling us their story aren't actually happening to us. And so it's just doing exactly what it's supposed to do to protect us. And we're having these mini fight or flight responses all day long, over and over again. And when we minimize that, when we don't have permission to acknowledge that that's a normal thing, then it builds up over time, and then it can cause a lot of problems, and it does.
I got there's so much
I know, right?
I want to jump into because that's that idea of the brain not really being able to tell this is not actually happening to you. It's like I tell people that, and people tend to just push that away, but
Yeah.
it's that I think that it's one of the it's kind of like what you and I were talking about before we started recording, is like this, like kind of like a constant traumatizing narrative from the media, from
Right.
the shows we watch. I tell people, like, people kind of make fun of me, but like I don't watch scary movies anymore.
Mhm.
I've even started like I'll start a show and I'll be like, I'm not up for this. I've noticed I feel like I don't have the capacity for it anymore.
Right.
And so that's kind of like does that add up? Does it stack up on us? Because I feel like at some point it stacked up on me and I was no longer able to do the work. And that's when I ended up leaving therapy.
It absolutely does add up. And vicarious trauma, part of its definition is that it's a gradual process. Same oftentimes with secondary traumatic stress. So for folks listening who are not in a helping role or profession, but also the power of the hand model of the brain, this was developed by Dan Siegel, is that when our brain is in this subcortical space, you'll notice that my fingers are not wrapped around, they're not online. So when we go into fight, flight, freeze, etc., our cortex, that smart thinking part of our brain, our lid flips and it goes offline. Okay. Because the cortex and our prefrontal cortex, especially, that's the smartest part of our brain. It's so freaking slow compared to all of this subcortical parts of our brain. And this is the part of our brain that keeps us safe. This is what has evolved to not only get us away from tigers, lions, and bears, but now in our modern day, from all the shit we see on social media and in the news and that we're confronted with micro and macroaggressions, all the things, right? And when our lid is constantly flipping, that means that all of this smart executive functioning and logical brain is just not working. And it's not able to do its job.
That's so I teach this same thing when I have an anxiety course I've taught for years. And what I try to explain to people is that you've got to understand that, like, this stuff that you're talking about developed in an immediate response environment. You see, my favorite is the short-faced bear. It's this terrifying bear that used to be out here, 14 feet tall and ate like 45 pounds of meat a day. And a lot of that meat was like us. And so the same system that was meant to deal with that, you fight, you freeze, you flee, whatever you do, is the same thing that kicks in when you get an email from your boss.
Right.
That says, hey, I need to talk to you on Monday morning, which is now a delayed response environment.
Yep.
So it sounds like kind of like some of this. So if you're watching, I don't know, you're watching Breaking Bad or some show that's got, gosh, Ozark stressed me out for like months. It's like the brain is kind of like interpreting that as an immediate response environment when really it's like this, it's not even a real thing.
Right.
It's not happening at all, but the brain is taking it as happening right now. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yep, absolutely. I mean, that's why we have nightmares about scary movies. There's also something interesting, and I'm guilty of this, where On the flip side, a lot of people find quote unquote comfort or relaxation in like true crime and like genres like that. And part of what we're starting to understand or hypothesize is that it's this thing where logically our cortex knows that with the true crime, we're going to figure out what happens at the end. So we actually get the bow on top, right? We have to go through all the scary stuff, but then we know there's a nice little ribbon at the end and we're going to figure out what happened. And so it kind of closes that loop. Whereas with the email from your boss, you do not know what's going to happen until you walk into that meeting. When you're working with clients as a trauma therapist, you don't know what your client's going to walk in with. And sometimes they leave unresolved at the end of the session. And so our brain doesn't get that nice kind of conclusion that it really is wanting to know that this scary thing is there back later in our timeline, that it's done, it's over with, we don't have to stress over it anymore.
That makes so much sense, and it's I think back to clients who just kind of up and disappeared, as happens with clients, or I had one who committed suicide, and the lack of resolution, the
Yeah.
lack of like knowing that was never going to wrap up was one of the things that kept jumping up,
Yep.
because I know I'll still think of clients from a long time ago, like I wonder whatever happened to them,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think about it from the other side when a therapist abandons and that client has that pulled out from under them and they never get to come to that place with the bow, as you put it.
Yeah.
And I get not everything has bows and things like that, but part of our job is to try to help people get to that bow as much as possible. Is
And
that
having empathy for the overwhelm that can get in the way, right? So whether it is the client, the therapist, or a best friend, right? That overwhelm of connecting, that overwhelm of being vulnerable and empathically engaged with someone is a lot. And especially for people who've experienced a lot of relational trauma, a lot of complex PTSD, relationships can be the scariest threat in the entire world, scarier than that actual short-faced bear coming after them.
right? Well, you look at like humans in earlier times. Our tribe, our group of people was the only thing that kept us alive.
Yeah.
I hear people dismiss a lot, like, I shouldn't care what other people think about me. And of course you do.
Yeah.
Like for the longest time, that was what kept us alive. I think to some degree, it feels like that's tied to survival too, because if your tribe rejected you,
Yeah.
we don't have good teeth. We don't have good eyes. We don't have good ears. We have terrible claws compared to all the animals we're talking about.
Yep.
It's our ability to work together.
Yeah.
That was so important. So it sounds like a lot of this is just tied to deep architecture in our brain that we don't have access to.
Exactly. I mean, and we're wired for connection. Our attachment system is one of the first ways that we are able to make sure that we can survive from an evolutionary perspective. So babies have to be able to attach to someone that can take care of them, that can protect them, because they are utterly helpless. And so that attachment system is one of the first things inside of our brain that is making sure that we survive. And it then promotes our survival even more because of a lot of the things that you're describing. But we have socially and culturally kind of made that out to be a not good enough. You're weak if you need other people, especially, in a lot of the cultural norms here in the US. And so then when people pick up on that need for someone else, they shame themselves internally of like, God, I should just be able to do this all by myself. Clearly, I'm not strong enough and not cut out for it.
And that's, I hear that all the time. And it's still surprising to me to hear it from therapists.
So much
connected. But I was like that. I mean, I struggled with that. It's that cultural narrative is so overwhelming. And so tell me about the collective, because that sounds like a pretty direct answer to that for people that you've created.
Yeah, so the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective is a direct answer to that, but it's not necessarily an easy answer. And I think it's important to acknowledge that up front, because like you're saying, therapists are taught that if they're experiencing vicarious trauma, if they're burnt out, that's their fault and that they need to fix it, right? There's so much shaming that goes on in our training and supervision and consultation and online groups of you're not ethical or this is your problem, you need to be fixing it. And so it's really scary to reach out to other therapists and say, hey, can I come hang out with you? Because a lot of us have been burned and hurt, and it's just safer alone. It can feel safer alone. And yet, that isolation, whether it's because we're in private practice or we're working in a big agency and we're alone, surrounded by others, it is the greatest driver of burnout. And then people leaving the field without making the informed choice to do so. I have no problem when therapists decide not to maintain their license. I think that's awesome when they can make that choice for themselves. But when they have to jump ship to save themselves because they don't see any other way out, it makes me so incredibly sad. And so, having a space like Brave, my hope is that it can be a place where trauma therapists can just be human together, just show up and know that they're going to be received and supported.
That was the thing that just grabbed me when I first heard about what you're doing. I left pretty intentionally. I left over a course of years, but I do feel that it was inevitable. I was fortunate to be able to see it coming and to start stepping out. But I think if I'd handled things different when I was younger, I tell people all the time, I should have been a therapist for 25 years instead of 10, because I loved it the way I love coaching now. At the beginning,
Yep.
I loved it. I was like, this is it for me. This is what I'm going to do. But I didn't have that training. I didn't have people around me. And I see that with so many therapists now, where I've got these little pockets. I still get a lot of people requesting referrals, and I've got these pockets of therapists that I send to. And I've always thought, like, how do I connect them? How do we
Right.
connect therapists? But then I find that a lot of therapists are hesitate to hang out with other
Yep.
therapists, because it's almost
Because
like,
they've
I don't
been
know, maybe they
burned.
see through me, or I don't want to be at work when I'm out. So tell me what the dynamic looks like with that, because you're bringing them all together.
Well, and I used to be that person of like, I do not hang out with other therapists. I was like, nope, this is my like 9 to 5. And then afterwards, I do not hang out with anyone who's in the mental health profession. That actually shifted for me around COVID. That was kind of around when I was starting Brave too. I'll just share this and then answer your question. For me, having friends who are also therapists has been, and in safe and supportive ways, has been really freeing for me, because we can talk in different ways than you can with a non-therapist, right? People are always, not always, but oftentimes people would be like, stop therapizing me, because we talk in very specific ways and we can get very direct and we are not afraid to ask certain kinds of questions. And when you have people in your corner who have your back and you can talk to them in that way and know that even if there's a rupture, that repair is possible, it is so freaking healing and freeing and liberating. And really that I'm biased, but I also hear from members in Brave that that's the experience in Brave, where so often our members get to show up and ask those questions that they feel a lot of shame about, that they never would have asked anywhere else. And they can bring it to us in Brave, whether asynchronously via a secure message in Signal or on a live consultation call. We don't record them because none of that needs to live on forever. We need to honor people's spaces and, of course, follow HIPAA. But that they can bring up these questions and not be shamed, and be able to have really direct, open conversations about it. And then also just show up and like share your favorite memes or like whatever else is going on. And so it can be a both and we can just, again, be human.
That's, I mean, that sounds, it sounds like that would have been so nice, to have something like that. But as you're saying it, I'm thinking, like, would younger James have engaged that? You know,
Yeah.
what what are the demographics you see that are most open to coming to something like Brave? What
So
do you do?
we have a lot of folks who are in private practice. I think that it can be an easier yes when you're in private practice and you don't have a built-in kind of water cooler moment or, consultation spaces. We also have a lot of folks who work in larger organizations where it's easy to get lost in the crowd. And then we have a number of group practice owners who have said, yes, I want this for everyone in my practice, anyone who wants to be a part of it, and to recognize that it can be something that can be woven throughout as even a benefit of their employment. That said, our demographics are pretty diverse. We have men and women, we have people in the US and abroad, we have folks from lots of different backgrounds. And so it helps to know that you can be seen.
Yeah, and it's when you have that many people, it validates it more.
Yeah.
Like it's not just people like me, quote unquote, however a
Mhm.
person defines themselves. So let's say they join Brave. What does it look like? I don't have a real good picture of like what y'all do.
Yeah. So when they join, the first thing that they're going to see is our online community. So I use a platform called Heartbeat. It's kind of like Mighty Networks or Circle. Some people might be familiar with those. It's a community platform that is off of social media, intentionally protected in that way. And Heartbeat is where all of our replays are, it's where our ongoing chat is. We have different threads for referrals, resources, silly things, announcements. So that's the way that we can connect asynchronously. Then we also have live calls every month. We have a minimum of 4. Oftentimes we have even more than that. We're adding more and more actually right now. We have I lied. We have a minimum of 5 now because we now have 3 consultation groups. I do an education call every month. We have at least 1 guest expert training every month. People can purchase CEs for our guest expert trainings now as well. And we're going to be adding even more consultation and specialized consultation opportunities. We're going to have a brain spotting consultation group coming up soon. So there are lots of opportunities to connect, and so people can get as specific and as niche down as they want, or as broad, given all the different ways that they can be a part of Brave, and they can show up as much or as little as they want. I have members who have never attended a live call and they are super active in the community, vice versa, and anywhere in between. And so there's no expectation on the people who join. They get to take or leave as much as they want and need.
That sounds that just sounds amazing. It sounds like I hear people trying to start these things. I hear this is one of those things that you hear people say they want to do, but like you've actually done it. And this you have so many different avenues for people in there. It seems like no matter introvert, extrovert, whatever, there's going to be something for them there. And it's just so needed for therapists. What are you seeing as outcomes for people? Like what are people saying about what it's done for them?
So, oh my gosh, so much. Not being alone, right? Knowing they can ask those hard questions. Also, learning about not just vicarious trauma, but vicarious resilience, which is the other side of empathic engagement, where when we engage empathically with the people we're serving, we're not only soaking up the hard stuff, but the glimmers as well. And that's a big thing we work on in Brave of let's just kind of call out our glimmers today so we can share them and have a positive impact on everyone, because it does have that ripple effect.
What do you mean by glimmers?
So, glimmers is a term that kind of is used more broadly. So, a lot of times you'll see people talk about glimmers in the context of trauma, where, even when we've experienced trauma, there are still beautiful things that happen in the world, and giving kind of permission to soak that up. Same goes for us as helpers, healers, trauma therapists. Even as we're doing really hard work with our clients, so many beautiful things happen, some big, mostly little things, and learning how to scoop those up, how to identify them, really install them in our bodies, and then enhance them by sharing them with other people who get it can make all the difference in our work and can become a renewable energy source for us. So that's another thing that our members really appreciate, is learning about that and how to access it.
That's this thing you said about vicarious resilience. Like resilience is one of the things I'm most fascinated about. If I had to like bottom line the most valuable thing I learned in therapy over the last, this is 2025. Yeah, so it's been a year and a half.
It is 2025.
It's
I know.
just
I have no. Yeah.
I was gonna say I've been doing it for like 6 months. I'm like, no, it's closer to 18. But it was the idea of resilience was I had always kind of looked down on myself for the things I'd learned from hard times and judgments I'd had towards others, where
Yeah.
I'd said, I need people to handle their shit. I just need people to. And what my therapist helped me understand is that I have a lot of resilience, but I didn't recognize it as that, so I wasn't able to utilize it that way.
Right.
Tell me about vicarious resilience, though, because resilience is just the topic I've been really obsessed with lately.
Yeah, so with vicarious resilience, so one of the greatest things about being a trauma therapist is you really truly see people get better. We have treatments and interventions that work. And so seeing people come in and have a goal and feel like they're so broken, like they're never going to feel different, can be so hard as a trauma therapist and any therapist, right? But knowing that you're going to help them get better can truly make all the difference. Now, that journey has a lot of ups and downs along the way, right? And the glimmers, the vicarious resilience is not just the good stuff, but when we connect with our clients, when we are engaging with empathy and compassion with them, when we know how to notice and pick up on those things, oftentimes it starts in our body, feeling the warm fuzzies in our body. Or for me, oftentimes I'll tear up, I'll be brought to tears, whether of pride, gratitude, happiness, or also because I'm so connected in sadness with this person. And that connection, that relationship, when we start to be able to reframe it, which is what it sounds like your therapist was helping you learn how to do with some of your experiences, and it can then become this thing that we can use as an energy source for us. We don't have to add more stuff to our to-do list to take care of our needs. It doesn't get rid of any of the needs meeting stuff either, but it becomes this thing that renews us through our practice instead of just draining us.
And so, kind of like the same way that things can kind of pull us into trauma as we experience it,
Mhm.
things can pull us into resilience as we experience
Yeah,
trauma.
and it was actually discovered on accident. So some researchers in the early 2000s were studying therapists who were working with survivors of torture, and they were expecting to see vicarious trauma, secondary traumatic stress, things like that. The therapist started talking about how working with these clients had dramatically improved their lives, how working with survivors of torture had such a positive impact on them as therapists. It allowed them to really kind of rethink the way that they viewed the world, to really connect with what matters and to trust the process as a trauma therapist. And so that's where vicarious resilience came from, being discovered on accident. And now it's a big mission of mine to make sure everyone knows about it, because still very few people do even know that it exists.
Yeah, you just don't hear about that. You just don't hear about that. We hear about all the stuff we were first
Right.
talking about. So somebody who's watching this, a therapist who's watching this, they want to be part of it. How do they join your Brave Collective?
Yeah, the easiest thing to do is head to my website, braveproviders.com. If you go to braveproviders.com/brave, that'll take you right to the page to learn everything about it and to join us. Also, just reach out to me. I am here. I'm accessible. I want to be able to connect with the trauma therapists who are curious about this, who have reservations, so we can talk about that. And if Brave isn't the right fit, I often will have a recommendation for something else that will be. So I know that you've shared with me that you want to be able to share Brave far and wide, right? Why do you care that therapists are able to get the support that they deserve?
Man, there's the personal perspective on it. Where I was, and I've moved. I've not been a therapist for long enough now. I'm wholly invested in the coaching, and I love it. But I still can look back and say I could have done that for longer. Like I said,
Mm.
earlier. I think that even now working with people, even coaching and counseling, coaching and therapy are very similar.
Yeah,
I think the big mistake a lot of coaches make is that they don't have that. I tell people, if dysfunctional to baseline therapy, if you're a coach and you're working in that sphere, you're in that space, you're headed for trouble. You should not
mhm,
be doing that. And even though I have the credentials and the education, I'm not a therapist anymore, so I don't
right.
work in that space. Baseline to thriving is appropriate, also appropriate for therapy, but that's where coaches need to work. But even in this baseline to thriving, the thing that I see stop people so often from doing the cool things they want to do, from stepping out and making those the just that's scary to step out and do something,
Yeah.
is it's often trauma, and it's
Mhm.
unresolved, it's unrecognized. So many things that, like, I think we got this scary dichotomy that I see these days, where we've got a lot of things that are not trauma are being called trauma.
Mhm.
And the problem with that is, maybe it's annoying or frustrating or whatever. I don't care about that. What worries me about it is that we are trivializing real trauma.
Mhm.
And so I find that a lot of people, they don't want to acknowledge that something was traumatic. They're like, no, that's just this. I'm like, no, like, that shit is traumatic. Like,
Right.
we've got to sort that out. And that kind of like the trivializing of it keeps people from addressing it a lot,
Mhm.
and I've had people even directly reference that. They'd be like, I just, I don't want to be one of these people online who say, oh, my trauma this, my trauma that. And it's like, well, no, that doesn't mean that there's not real trauma out there,
Right.
you know?
Or that what
Um,
happened to you doesn't matter, it doesn't affect you.
exactly. And then also that different things affect different people.
Mhm.
Going back to that resilience thing, that was what she really helped me understand, was that something that I don't even blink at could be very disruptive to somebody else. And
Mhm.
so I think that we all have to understand that things are going to hit us differently. For therapists specifically, first of all, they're sitting in the middle of all this stuff I'm talking about right now. They're having to sit with all of this. And what I have noticed since 2020, every therapist I talk to says that the acuity, like the difficulty, the
Yeah.
how hard the things coming to them has gone through the roof, and it's been
Yep.
steady increasing. It's been steady increasing. There seems to be more of a lack of therapists, not enough
Mhm.
sometimes, and so those therapists who are doing it are taking on more. The trauma therapists are just taking that on, and I mean, to some extent, I project forward a little bit, and I think, like, man, we're headed for something where we're going to have like a crisis of therapists.
Yeah. Yep.
And so that's why this was so important to me. It is a little outside what I talk about a lot these days, but I have a lot of therapists who watch
Mhm.
and who I talk to. And ever since meeting you and just going on your website and seeing that, I've thought, like, holy shit, like we need more therapists to know about this. Like I'm not a recruiter for your
No,
collective.
you're not.
I have no affiliation. This is our second conversation ever, but it's unavoidable to me. I can't not see how important this
Mhm.
is. And so, um, yeah. I think that I want to see therapists be able to have that space and to normalize that. And with this thing you've got, where you've got all these different avenues and so many different ways of doing it, I look back at me, and I'm not a real joiner type person,
Yeah.
But I look at that and I think, like, holy crap, I could have thrived in that.
Hmm.
Like, where I'm not, I don't have to go to the calls, or I can show up at the calls and just listen.
Right.
It's just a cool thing you've created. And I
Mm.
want to see that. I want to see more therapists using it, because I don't think things are getting easier anytime soon.
They're not. You're right. We are on the verge of a crisis, if not having it already happen.
May have already crossed it.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And therapists need permission to be human. We
Yes.
do not receive that really anywhere.
Yeah.
And in losing that permission to just be human, we're white knuckling it, right? We are in our own fight, flight, survival mode because we're afraid of what's going to happen to our career. We're worried about not being able to help our clients who are, like you said, the severity is increasing and increasing. We are just getting attacked from every single angle, whether it be from insurance companies or politics or whatever it might be. How can you sustain if that is your ecosystem? And I think it's important to normalize and to acknowledge that that's happening, and also to say that there may be some things, there may be some even small just adjustments or shifts that can make a difference, and Brave might be part of that for some of the folks that are listening.
I think the community aspect is
Yeah, we need each other more than ever.
there's nothing that can replace community. Like, there is
Mhm.
nothing that we can do. All the therapy, all the,
Right.
hobbies, relaxation, meditation, sleep, without other people.
Right,
It's
exactly.
all wallpaper in a house that's on fire without other
Yep.
people. And there's something about being able to speak to other therapists. I
Yep.
still enjoy being able to talk to somebody who speaks the language, and where you
Well,
can.
before we started recording, you were about to jump in, and I was like, "Hold on. How are you?"
I was just going, wasn't I? Yes.
That's because I care and I really do want to know, but I also was like, I
Yes.
feel like part of what that was I wanted to feel more connected to you, because both of us have had a lot going on, and we've been kind of like trying to like just go through the motions and get shit done. And I also know that like the way that you and I have had conversations before has been so meaningful to me. And so I wanted to check in on you, and knowing that you have the train as a therapist, I was like, I can talk to him like this. And so
Yeah.
it can make a difference.
Well, and that was like in that moment, I appreciated that very much because that's not something people tend to ask me. That's not the
No.
role that I'm in, is to say, how are you doing? What are we
Right.
working on today?
Yeah.
It's very like action oriented, and we got boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
And so I noticed that in that moment. That's something that therapists have an angle and an insight into.
Yeah.
But they're often offering it to others,
Right.
instead of having it offered to them.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so all of those things together are why I think just what you've created is, I think it's important. I think it's important, and I think I know it's already good for people, and I know it could be good for so many more.
Thank you.
And so I appreciate so much you taking the time to come have this conversation. I just the knowledge about the brain and stuff alone was fantastic. It's a deeper approach to things that I've skimmed the surface with people for a long time. So, if somebody's looking to join up, what would you tell them? If you've got, think about that therapist that's out there that's struggling, they don't feel like they've got anybody, they don't feel like they can step into something like that. What do you tell them?
A couple things. So, one, start with your immediate system. Okay. So, if Brave feels like too much or it's too unknown, think about who in your immediate system is available, even just a little bit to talk to. See if maybe you can create your own consultation group if that's something that you're craving. And if you're wanting to learn more about Brave, to reach out to kind of get that connection, start with me. Just reach out to me. You don't have to jump all the way in. It's okay to kind of dip your toe into the swimming pool. Just contact me and we can talk.
And I'll say too, if you've listened to me for a while, if you know me on Instagram, if you know me in real life and you're curious, holler at me. I'll be glad to connect you with her. And everything I've said on here, I'll be happy to say person to person. This is something that I'm excited about for you, and I think it'd be
thanks, James. And remember, you're still in a helping role. So vicarious trauma and vicarious resilience is something that you get to experience as well. So don't minimize that.
I was thinking when we were talking about it, it's like, I'm so fortunate. I get so much more of the vicarious resilience.
Yeah, right.
And that's it's to have a word for that and a concept for it is fantastic.
Yep.
So, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Ginny Hughes. I hope you can see just the importance of the work she's doing, that you can see just how necessary the kind of stuff she's doing for the people who help people is. If you are a therapist, if you are somebody who is doing trauma work with people, I really want to encourage you to check her out. All the information's down below. You can find her you can just find everything you need to know about her in the show notes. And after the fact, I asked her, how much is this? I was expecting her to say, it's, $150, $200 a month. It's freaking $12 a month. Like it's amazing. And she could be, from somebody who's in this realm of doing this kind of stuff, she could be charging a lot more, but she wants to make sure this is accessible for people. I think after watching that and seeing how much that offers, how much that collective offers people, you can recognize that $12 is, that's the most minimal investment you could possibly make. If you are in those professions, please consider reaching out to her. If you know somebody who is, please consider just telling them about her and what she's doing, because this really is important work. This is a tough time in history to be helping people with the hard things. This is a tough time in history to be doing the trauma work. So we need to take care of those people. If you know anybody doing that, please consider just sending them this podcast, or just send them her information directly so that they can look into it.